every one of them is saying, yes, this work is important. Yes, this work is valuable, but my body is taking the brunt of this. My body cannot sustain this. And for those who are doing 20, 25, 30 years, and then they're retiring, they are finding the necessity to go, man, I need to heal. So I need to take 5 years to heal from this toxic relationship.
School is in, but are you really ready to learn? Open your eyes to a new day in education with The Awakening Educator, a program specifically designed to explore a new, mindful way of educating our youth. Learn about social-emotional learning, new modalities of teaching, and the most relevant topics in education with your hosts, Susan Andrian and Megan Sweet. Susan and Megan will take you inside the issues by looking at them from different points of view, from policies and research to teaching models that are actually used in schools. There's never a dull moment in this classroom. Have any questions you'd like to ask? Maybe you have knowledge you'd like to share, and share your thoughts live on air. Grab a pen and paper and get ready to open your textbooks and minds to a new way of learning on The Awakening Educator.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Awakening Educator. My name is Megan Sweet.
And I'm Susan Andrian.
And today we have a really special show. Two doctors are in the house, Dr. Rochelle Rogers-Ard and Dr. Knaus, who will be talking with us about a book that they wrote called Black Educational Leadership: From Silencing to Authenticity. And they'll share about some of their work and about their collaboration together. So welcome you two. Rochelle, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, thanks so much. So I'm Rochelle Rogers-Ard, and super excited to be back on The Awakening Educator to share with you, Megan and Susan, and really excited to bring our own unique take on what does it mean to be an authentic leader, specifically within spaces that are not designed for authentic leadership, right? So normally I know folks run down a litany of all the stuff that they've done. I feel like that's why we Google. So feel free to Google me and to check out my website with my name.com. But the important thing to know is that my goal and my passion is to grow and develop critical anti-racist leaders within educational spaces, but also in other spaces, but particularly African-American women.
And I am Chris Knaus, academic professor person thing. But what all that really means is I'm paid to colonize students within a semblance of, no, you're smart. No, you're smart. No, let me determine for you how smart I think you are with this grade thing that I'm supposed to do. And really how I identify as a critical race theory practitioner. Somebody who, no matter where I move, I try to recognize that racism is everywhere and all the time. And my role as a white dude, as a dude who sometimes identifies as Jewish, is to interrupt ongoing systemic racism and the everyday whackness of many white people and the systems and we essentially infuse whackness across the globe. And more important probably than any of that is I like to cook. I would probably be a bartender / chef if we didn't have racism. But since we have racism, that cooking and bartending will wait for quite some time. Nice to be with you all.
How did the two of you meet and start working together?
Oh my God, so funny. This morning I was like, I think she's going to ask, how did we meet? So the real story is Chris. I think of Chris as a Lego piece, or more, maybe for those of you who are a certain age, like I am, like a Tinker toy. For those of you who didn't have boys, I had 3 boys. So there were always pieces all over the floor and I was stepping on them. But the important thing is they were connectors, right? They're connecting pieces. And
that
so
you step on.
Yeah, I did. Right. And it's important to understand that many times they were underfoot. But for you,
it's true about connectors sometimes, actually.
Sometimes connectors are underfoot, and Chris was underfoot and saw a great grant opportunity at that time. He was at Cal State East Bay. I was at Oakland managing Teach Tomorrow in Oakland and had the great fortune of being in alignment with Dr. Kitty Epstein, who at that time was Ronald Dellum's education advisor. And so I believe, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, you reached out to Kitty, right?
That's right.
And then Kitty was like, I don't know who this person is. So I need folks to come vet, like, how many people call and say, let's make money together, right? We didn't know who he was from Adam. So
I think she said who this white boy is, but
I can't quote that because I don't know if she said that. I'm thinking she said that based upon we know who she is, but I'm not going to say that was a direct quote. So she invited me and she invited Kimberly Mayfield to come to this meeting, and we're in the mayor's office, at 14th and Clay. And Chris comes in and it was like, I'm all about critical race theory. I'm all about this. And here's an opportunity and let's go for it. And my experience with folks when they brought in opportunities is usually they want to like seriously rate the folks of color for their work, for their, for all the beneficial things that they bring to this work. But Chris was like, no, like, I just want to see good people get the work done. And so, of course, after meeting, there were 2 meetings after meeting, right? Which is what happens after church. So Kim and Kitty pulled me aside and they're like, find out who this person is, right? And that at that time, they may have said white boy. Find out who this person is, because I don't know, right? And then I met with Chris and we talked for what had to have been like another hour. And there was just a real good sense of who he was as a person, but it was still like, he's a white boy. So let's see what happens. And he was good as his word, right? And we wrote the grant, and he was overly generous in the way in which he moved. And TTO got the grant. And we started working together from there. And that was at least 14 years ago, right? Like it was a while ago.
2008.
Well, I'll put a timing on it because I was pregnant with Malcolm at the time. And that was when my official stalking of you began. So Chris, I'm glad you were there. But I clocked Rochelle at a grad school in grad school because she came and spoke. Ben was an infant. So just to like put it all in perspective. And I was like, well, this woman I need to follow. And then I found myself at that same table in the mayor's room.
That's right.
And I was pregnant with Malcolm. And that's when it became official. Because, I got my hooks in a little bit and was able to, I haven't let you go. So that was a powerful roundtable and opportunity. So that's
And
cool.
is Malcolm 12?
Malcolm's 12.
Yeah.
I was 2008. I was pregnant with Malcolm, so that all works.
He'll be 13.
Yeah, that was amazing. That's how I connected again with Megan, and that's how I connected with Chris. So
I'm curious about this connector, because it's, to me, it's the thing that's so essential in this work is really being able to identify the people who are all about the work, who are all about the kids, who are really able to dig down and do the hard work and connect them with other people who are all about the work and all about the kids. And we weave together movements that do real change. And I heard you say it, Rochelle, multiple times, connector. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think I'm going to lob to Chris because I will say that there's a lot of distrust in, I was going to say in my community, but just for me, when approached by white folks. So like, I hear you, Susan. And also I've experienced where white folks are like, let me connect you with this well-meaning person, but it is super self-serving. And, there's the interest convergence that is negative for me.
Yeah.
Right? So, but I haven't experienced that with Chris, right? So I'm just going to lob that to you, Chris.
I think of connecting as like, it's I have two answers to that. So first is like my theoretical answer, and then the second is like what that actually means in practice. And I feel like that my theory answer is, as a white dude operating within systems that are trying to make me have a segregated reality where I only kick it with white people, I only live in white spaces, I only move in white spaces. That I've never lived like that. I grew up around predominantly folks of color. I was raised partially by folks of color who saw me as a poor white dude living in some violence and were like, This dude needs some actual male influence and probably man of color influence to silence his craziness right now, but also give him some like hardcore healing space. And so I kind of saw connecting as a thing growing up as like, if I do what I'm supposed to do, I just hang out with I'll say some of my siblings, and I will say most of the white people that I knew growing up. They live in self-segregated white bubbles in spaces that there's a whole bunch of brown people around them. And I knew that being an academic, I'm in spaces that intend to be entirely white with the token here or there, right? And so if I'm not interrupting that as daily practice, then I'm essentially living what white people are supposed to do, which is just like be acquiescent to all this racism and just like have a token. Make sure that the one person of color or two or three or four are silenced positionally so that you can just continue to do the whiteness that we're supposed to do. So I see connecting as kind of interrupting some of that and bringing folks, not just bringing folks to tables that are exclusive, but being like, fuck that table. That's actually not the table. That's the table of whiteness. And if you want to be at the table of whiteness and try to interrupt that, you go on ahead. I feel like we can actually do better work, not at that table, in other tables, in other spaces and places where we actually get to set the agenda and make the food. So that's the theoretical part. The connecting part is that I've actually come to, and I would say because in part working with Rochelle and seeing in partnership with other people with us, seeing who just can't really kick it, who cannot hang, who is all about ultimately themselves. And at some point, they're just going to put that on the table and try to steal the work, right? And steal the table, literally, and be like, no, I'm going to bring this table back to the university or back to a district or back to my white people. And I'm like, wait, right? So I've kind of developed almost like a hierarchy of connecting where it, like literally, like if I send you an email and connect two people, I'm not invested. If I send you a text and connect the two of you, I'm lightly more invested than I am because at least I have your number, right? So, but if I actually try to connect people in person multiple times, I'm invested in y'all meeting, and I feel like for me, there's a practical level of like trusting people and enacting that trust of like, let me actually bring this person to a table, and so now I'm to a kitchen table, so that we can break bread. And if we haven't done that, I'm not really connecting you. I'm lightly connecting you, meaning you might be some use out of you, but I don't have that trust that Rochelle is talking about yet. Or I know that I have trust, meaning I trust that you're going to be shady at some point and try to take this and get your own affirmation out of whatever collaborative work. And if you're there for affirmation, then I'm like, this is not a connecting moment. You already have institutional power to colonize ideas, practices, a bunch of folks of color. Why would I help with that? Even if you're a person of color, why would I help with that?
Such a great point. I mean, I think I wrote down trustworthiness while Rochelle was talking, and you've named trust, and I think trust has come up a lot because I think trust is the key element and of so much of this work and of actually transforming it. And some of it is like being what I heard from you, Chris, is like actually just following through on your word and also holding yourself accountable. And like, I like that internal checklist, like, well, am I really doing the work or am I really trusting? Like if it's an email, I'm probably not like actually like stretching myself. But if I'm like having you at my kitchen table, I'm really making an intentional effort, but also I'm imagining those emails and the phone call to the kitchen table are also met by people showing that they're trustworthy at each of those places. So you're checking in on them as well. And then the consistency and the follow through. So I love what you named Rochelle around like, okay, he said he was going to give us money. I had a phone conversation with him. Let's see what's up. And then you actually followed through on what you said, which I think the heartbreak of so much of this work, especially for those of us who are really intentional and wanting to be about disrupting systems, is that there are so many people that aren't actually generally like trustworthy, that's painful all around. And I often say it requires an intentional effort to work against our own best interests, to be trustworthy enough to break down the systems that are supporting white supremacy, right? So as white people, we have to make an active choice to work against our own best interests. And that's, and it actually isn't like, really, it's our own best interest for everybody to be equal and have equal access. But like, it takes a mental shift to be like, oh, that's what's true. So I think initially it's that like, okay, I'm gonna step aside and step back and make space or bring people forward, and figuring out how to use our privilege in a way that actually is trustworthy, that is helping to elevate and bring and create more opportunity. And for me, I'm just so impatient about it because like we do not have time to waste. And for me, that becomes really frustrating because, you know, like when we can't actually get forward on the work because you have somebody in there showing up and, you know, whatever their identity is, they've shown that they're not trustworthy. For me, I just have like these legions of kids in my mind, and I'm just like, that's who I'm sitting with. And so that's my accountability factor, is like, how many kids are being impacted by this moment? How many opportunities are we losing or promoting in this moment in what we're doing? And when I get afraid, which I do a lot, because I think, at least for me, it can still feel scary and challenging to step forward and be an ally, as much as I have been working at it for a long time. I still have that moment of discomfort on occasion, and mostly because I want to say it and do it the right way. I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to be an ally in a way, or think I'm being an ally, but actually do things that are actually causing harm. You know, I'm not really afraid of stepping forward and calling people out on white supremacy. That was not my issue, but actually, how can I be an ally, and how can I demonstrate trust? And what if I said something the wrong way, and I'm breaking that trust down now, just through my words and actions, which is complicated. So you two started out with this grant. You showed Chris that you were trustworthy and brought this grant forward to Rochelle. It could have ended there, but you guys have continued to work together and grow. And I'm just wondering how that continued to build after that.
Yeah, I mean, I think relationships move at the speed of trust. And I am in no way saying Chris was the white savior that came in and, you know, and put his cape on and did right. What Chris did is he said, here's this opportunity. I think this is a great way for us to collaborate. We wrote the grant together with a lot of help from a lot of other people that we thought were dope, right? Including Kitty and Kim. And there was another elder at Cal State East Bay, whose name I can't remember, who did some work on that first grant as well. And so when I say he's a connector, it's not just his connection to me, but he'll pull people in and say, let's work on this together, right? That was the first grant. When it was awarded, Chris was like, we need to have some other people at the table, right? And so he was like, let's have this person, or let's, you know, and so over time, we started to craft a group of individuals. Now, let's be clear. I really wasn't bringing a lot of people to the table, right? Because I have this trust where I'm like, they're all whack. But Chris was like, no, like, let's see what it would take to work with these people. And some worked and some didn't, just to be absolutely transparent, right? And then he and I would go, whew, that person didn't work. We probably can't do work with them because they're whack, right? But so over time, we would continue to bring people. What I appreciate is that Chris has pushed me on being a little more open to collaboration. It has been my experience working in education, and like collaboration wasn't something that was fostered. Often taken, or you didn't get any credit for it. Like you do all the work and then this other person is like, look at what I did. So I didn't really see that demonstrated until I started to work with Chris, where we were like, there were numerous other projects. Because you know how when you write a federal grant, you're traveling, you're going to these different spaces, you're seeing a lot of people, and you have opportunities to really bring people in. And that was foreign for me. And so I was just following the lead where Chris was like, I think we should meet some people. In fact, we met a really great person at a conference, right? One of our that we started rocking with for like 10 years, right? It wasn't until recently that relationship fell off. But that happened just going to a conference and seeing somebody that was dope. And what I like about Chris is he'll be like, I heard her presentation. I think she's dope. Let's go reach out to her and have some coffee or something. And I was like, I don't want to meet nobody. And he was like, no, she was like, really? Right. And so then from that relationship, when I say connector, I really, really mean in the greatest sense, where Chris will see this, he sees something else way over here. And it's like, let's bring these two people together, even if he's not really in it. Right. We just kept doing that. And then Chris was like, I think you should teach. And I was like, oh, so literally, I was like, oh, one more thing to do. And so then we taught together at Cal State East Bay. We did another grant for the program, and that one pretty much you and I wrote. I feel like we taught together at some other places.
Yeah, something like that.
I mean, I feel like what shifted was at some point we just basically didn't let more than like a couple of weeks go by without connecting. And initially, I think that was around Teach Tomorrow in Oakland. Doing, I think, the work nationally, we started traveling around the country trying to look at programs that were saying they were diversifying the teacher workforce, but they either kind of weren't, or they were doing it without any care whatsoever about, like, are these anti-racist teachers of color, or are they just whack people of color that are just people of color and they're teachers and so they're bodies. We kind of grew together, critical lens of like, oh, these folks sound this isn't really the thing that we thought it was. But seeing that together, I feel like helped also, because I would see things, she would see things, we would always debrief, and that debriefing, I think, continued as to be like, well, what does the field need? What do we want to be doing collectively, and how can we shift the way that this country talks about diversifying teacher workforce, for example, without remotely talking about racism.
Well, I love what you're saying. We were both saying there, which is that it's the power of the conversation. So there's an initial door maybe that gets opened with a demonstration of trust on both sides. And then there's a series of shared experiences and opportunities to collaborate where you continue to deepen and develop that. And I love that notion of, which we don't get to do a lot these days anymore, but of maybe even just the forced nature of traveling together allowed you to debrief in some ways that maybe you wouldn't have if you hadn't traveled together. But over that time, and I feel like we've named that Chris is a connector, but Rochelle, what I would say that one of the things that you offer is that powerful conversation and intentional listening voice. And I think you're a connector too in different ways, but you're really a synthesizer. So I watch you a lot taking information and synthesizing it in really powerful ways so that you can take something from a conversation and you bring it forward in a really powerful way. So I can imagine that the two of you together, that's a neat combination. And
you can also hear the genuine affection for each other, that you started with this professional, well, I'm not really sure and we'll see, and I'm gonna be tempered in my we'll see, and then over time developed an actual genuine friendship, in addition to you're all about the work and you're about your word. And so not only are you being a connector, I trust that you care about me.
I'm going to take us to break, Susan. We come back from break. It would be great to hear about how you all came about creating the book. And a little bit of that process, like what the idea was behind it and some of the learnings that you had there. So
Sounds good.
I love supporting educators to find their inner voice and match all those school smarts with their innate instincts about what works best for students. It all starts with doing what I call self-work, dedicating time and attention to building a relationship with ourselves. We do this in a course I call the Beliefs Lab. By the end of this course, you'll understand why self-care is essential for being an effective educator, and you'll have strategies you can use right now. You will also get a handle on some of those beliefs that are helping you and those that are getting in the way. The next step is doing the schoolwork, leading classroom and school change. In the course I call The Cycle, you will learn a process for realizing goals for yourself and for your educational context simultaneously. You will also have deeper insights and strategies for putting your plans into action. Want more support as you engage in this self-work and schoolwork? I've got you covered. My personalized coaching and consulting services are designed to meet you in your school right where you are and support you to clarify your vision for the future. Want to know even more about what I do? My book is a great place to start. An Educator's Guide for Using Your 3 Eyes details the self-work and schoolwork that I described above and talks about concrete ways that you can start to feel better right now. If you want to learn more about how to work with me in the courses I just described, please come to my website, www.your3eyes.com. That's YOUR, the number 3, EYES.com.
Welcome back, everyone.
Yeah, so you both wrote a book, which we mentioned at the top of the hour, Black Educational Leadership. And so I'm wondering how that book came about, and maybe you could share some stories, that feel really salient from that book. I got to go to the book launch, and it was just really powerful for me to see the relationships again, this expansion of trust and the power of synthesizing information and how that translated into the way that the subjects of your book feel empowered and own their stories in a really profound way. But yeah, just wondering how that got started.
Chris is super heavily published and just
There's too much affirmation happening right now.
I'm
Stop
just
this
saying,
nonsense.
like, he's just all about being published. And I remember saying several years ago, I was like, Chris, man, I just really want to get published. He was like, well, the way to start that is to start with an article. And then let's do an article. And I was like, well, it can't be that easy. And it wasn't, but we did an article, 4 of us. And then we did 2 more articles together. And then he was like, now you need to do a chapter in a book. And I was like, oh, so, and so he connected me to an editor, and I did a chapter, and then I did another chapter, and he was like, it's really time for our book. So what's been happening is, at the root of it, I think both Chris and I, and correct me if you think this is overstating or oversimplifying, Chris.
Oh, you know I will.
Okay, good. We're really dope educators, like at the crux of it. No matter what else I do, I gain so much joy from teaching. And I watched Chris teach. So over time, we started having these courses that we were working in conjunction with. And at UW-T, Chris, your program, because you're the director of the doc program there, when you first brought me in, and he was making like these connections that everybody should be doing in their programs, but like the courses just fit together so beautifully. So he'd be like, let me know what you're doing in this course, because I'm gonna follow up with it in this course, you know? And so through that, we started to have this group of educators with whom we've been teaching, and who got their, you know, credentials or their admin credentials or their master's degrees, and many of whom have gotten their doctorate. And many of them are leaders. And we started talking to them just like unofficially, just having conversations. And Chris and I started talking, and we were like, these leaders are experiencing some very similar things. And so we pulled together a group, and we were like, let's just have some breakfast and let's just talk. And after that first meeting, Chris looked at me and was like, this is the book. And I was like, oh my God. So literally just really authentically having conversation. And I need you to know this conversation with, you know, several Black leaders who invited us in to hear the conversations that are usually held behind closed doors. Right. And we really tried to honor that space. And their rawness, their ability to really like open up and share some of the things that you don't normally hear principals say, I thought was key.
I think the food was key. I mean, I'm
That
kind of joking, but
helped.
right, like catered throwdown. Folks already knew Rochelle and I. Everybody already knew one of us, but I think almost everybody knew both of us at some point. So there was already a deep level of trust. But like, you come in and it's this like healing, soothing space of all Black folk and this random white dude that you already know. And there is like serious throwdown food. So folks are like, oh, damn, whoa, I got to get seconds. There's fresh fruit. You got pineapple up in here in addition to, right? Like, I mean, it was a throwdown.
Because
right?
it's 9 in the morning, right? So
I had to say there was some healthy
how
food
are we
too.
getting people to come at 9 on a Saturday, right? To come and have this conversation with us, you got to feed them.
And you feel that when there's good food and there's a space that's comfortable and caring and welcoming, people feel valued.
Right.
And when you feel valued, you feel safe. And when you feel safe, you're able to talk about what's happening for you. And if you don't have that experience of 1, I feel valued, 2, I feel safe, then you're not going to be able to get to the untangly ways in which folks have experienced so much harm in our education system, particularly leaders of color, particularly Black principals. And I look at our district right now and the district we're in, and I see the principals that have left, and how heartbreaking that is for those of us that are still there to see that our babies don't have the leaders that to in their schools and in their communities that wanted to be there, that were passionate, that were willing to fight, that were willing to be a part of
they've
it.
been pushed out
Yeah.
or they've been silenced.
Or they've been silenced. That's right.
Right.
I think
That's right.
we leave oppressive situations, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
That's
I
right.
mean,
That's an important distinction, and
Yes.
I really appreciate you bringing it up because it's really important distinction.
And I would say one of the the book became about how do we like hold space,
Yes.
and validate responses to that toxicity, right?
Mhm.
Versus what everybody was kind of saying is like not only can I not say this anywhere, if I even hint that I think that this is a toxic space and I'm being targeted, my students are being targeted, my families are being targeted, right? If I even hinted that, I have to deal with a whole nother level of conversations with, really come back to the term earlier, with a whole bunch of allies who are harming everybody around me with their good intentions in this conversation, right? So at some point, like the book project became almost irrelevant, and it was how do we create a space of healing, essentially, and foster healing, like essentially help remind them of what they're saying, and to what Susan said, it's like there's actually a conscious decision to leave, but we often frame that as I'm just leaving. Right. And we do that because it's like, well, I'm not really feeling right now because I've had to shut down so much of who I am at work. I'm so far removed myself from feeling this. My body is reminding me. Right. And so to like normalize that being a person of color, being Black in particular, and then being Black in a leadership role in a colonial, like hyper anti-Black school system, like that is not an okay thing to be at, right? And so, props to all the folks who are doing it, but that's not a sustainable, healthy thing for a human to do.
And one of the things that we suggest in our text is it's not sustainable. And I was like, Chris, this is going to, like, folks are not going to be able to, like, they're going to drag us for this. But you'll notice I said that and then I left. I mean, the reality is, right? So not sustainable. And it's May, so I'm sitting on several dissertation committees right now, all African-American women who are all getting their doctorates. And every one of them is saying, yes, this work is important. Yes, this work is valuable, but my body is taking the brunt of this. My body cannot sustain this. And for those who are doing 20, 25, 30 years, and then they're retiring, they are finding the necessity to go, man, I need to heal. So I need to take 5 years to heal from this toxic relationship. So if you look at it like anything else that's like a really bad relationship, do you want to invest, 20, 30 years in something that's really, really bad for you? And then Megan, I hear you. It's like, so, but we've got all these students, right? And so what do we do? So we recommend understanding that you're going into a toxic environment, creating some structures and strategies, but knowing that you cannot stay because the price is too high. And this is not what we teach anybody. So just, I understand that this is going against everything that we've ever taught, right? But the reality is specifically for Black women, because there's a huge toll, right? The intersectionality of gender and race cannot be underscored at this piece, right? So Black men while they experience similar things, they also get to experience leadership in a very different way, specifically if you're tall, I just name it, right?
Yeah.
What we think of as leaders, right? Much, much, much differently than Black women, right? And then for Black women who are queer, for Black women who have different other intersectionalities, like it just keeps going down the chart and the ways in which your body takes on the brunt of the oppression of the system. And we don't talk about it as Black women. We don't share. And we keep going, girl, just let that girl, just, and we must shift that. So for me, to your point, Chris, the book was great. And the book is great. Let me just say that's a great book. But also it underscored for me the necessity of healing spaces, and then made it okay for me. The writing of the book made it okay for me to think what else could be possible. Because I think I said to you, Megan, I had planned to live and die in Oakland. That was definitely, I was like, I'm going to die here. It's okay. Not okay.
I think that's such a power. I mean, to kind of circle back to some of the pieces that you've named, and maybe we'll start with the idea of food, and of conversation. But it is actually giving educators, especially let's say Black women educators in particular, permission to take care of themselves is really important. I think it's an educator problem in general. I talk a lot about that too. Like, actually, you have permission to take care of yourself. And even more than that, you are required to, because if you really think you're going to come and be in service of students and families, you're not doing anyone any favors, especially not the children that are on my mind, when you're showing up depleted, when you're then saying and doing things that are totally inappropriate in class. I focus more on white women educators because I am one, and that's an area that I feel like I have some expertise in around, like, right, you think you're showing up, you think you're being a savior, whatever it is that we put in our minds as white women as we step into this work. And then because we're not doing our own self-work and we're not taking care of ourselves, then that's all bleeding out onto our kids in ways that are really inappropriate and harmful, and not even just harmful in the moment, but like changing trajectory of children's lives in the future, self-concept kind of harmful. So I think valuing and nurturing folks and giving them that space. And that's something, Rochelle, that you do a lot. And it's something that I've benefited from, and I've seen you do it masterfully. So I think being a strong facilitator is a really powerful skill, but also being able to name truths in a way that feel true, but not terrifying to say out loud, giving folks the permission to be able to say their truths and know that the world's not going to actually fall apart when that happens, which it often feels like it will. Like, it's, I think often we take it on our bodies because it feels too scary to put that out loud and to say it. So creating that space for folks to say their truths. And when you say it and then you get validated by someone else, you don't feel so crazy because it all lives inside of us. And there's so many narratives that we're trying to like work against or work through, and archetypes, and what we're allowed to say or not allowed to say, or how people are going to see us based on these societal norms that are really messed up in general. So creating that space and then validating folks' point of view, and then allowing them to be nurtured and find a space to nurture themselves, I think is incredibly powerful and really important. And I'll say, like, I mean, I think I was one of the, I was super jealous when during the book launch, because I was like, oh, this is such a cool group of people, and the love that was clearly there. I had such a big FOMO moment. I just wanted to, I wanted in on, and I knew it wasn't my place, but I wanted in on. I think you're in. That were there. I got to manage the time and didn't do it well, but that's okay. That was my role. But just the connection that was there and the love that was on that call. And again, that sense of, and you all just named it, but of like knowing and owning our stories unapologetically, that I think you all gave to or helped to bring out of the folks that you worked with, is a really powerful point.
This notion of giving educators permission is something that I've been grappling with for a moment. Because so my experience, I can only use an I statement. My experience is that we prefer to be martyrs, right? That as educators, we prefer to say, so something that I used to hear all the time, I have 4 months of sick leave. What? You've got 4 months? I've got 6 months of sick leave. What? I have 7 months, right? We would start to, as a badge of honor, share how much sick leave we had. And finally, I started to think, that's not something that we should be sharing. Not only is it illegal, but also that means you're not taking your sick leave, right? And so I would ask people, what are you saving it for? Well, if I leave the district, which, folks weren't leaving, but if I leave the district, I want to be able to get a payout. Yeah, but you're going to be taxed on your payout. And really those days are there so you can take care of yourself. And what it brought up for me was just this notion of, what does it mean to give all that we can give as educators to the children who need us, right? And particularly for the folks that we were educating, Chris, you and I are often educating folks who are at our neediest schools, at our schools where children are furthest from opportunity.
Mhm.
And so because of the great need, we almost like we dog out people who leave at 3:30.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So you're a principal and you left to go home? Like, what is wrong with you? Right. And
Right.
I remember when my former superintendent left to go to her daughter's dance recital, and she was dragged, like, so she had time to go to a dance recital for her daughter, but she didn't have, and I was like, damn, can she be a mama for a minute? Like, it was,
Mhm.
right. So what we absolutely have to do is reframe, right? What does it mean to be an educator who certainly loves and wants to make shifts and changes, but not at the expense of my own life?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not at the expense of my own life. And I am going to be the person who says, I choose myself
Mhm.
first. And because this is not something that we do as Black women, right? There is a history of Black women of choosing everything else in our
Mhm.
community, of being the backbone, being that strong Black sister, right? You know, and then, but, you know, Black women's community is littered with the bodies of strong Black sisters,
Mhm.
Right.
right?
That's
And
right.
so, because of that double-edged sword that we are often seen as needing to do that in our community, as well as educators, there's rarely an opportunity where Black women get together and go, sis, I'm gonna choose me. Like, I'm gonna take this
Mhm.
2 weeks because I need it. And we wait until we are
Yeah.
barely walking. And then we're like, damn, I think I should have done something
Yeah.
else.
Now I
All
see
in
it.
service of these children. And I want you to know this huge dichotomy
Right.
exists, right?
Yeah.
So for me in writing From Silencing to Authenticity, my authenticity came when I said I choose me.
Mhm.
And that meant not being in those oppressive spaces.
That's right.
And there were only 2 or 3 people who gave me permission. And both two of the 3 are on this call.
Mhm.
Because the other people that I talked to were like,
Mhm.
oh, you know, clutch pearls, or this, you're selling out.
Mm.
Or you remember that, Chris? I was in tears. Oh, I can't believe they said I was selling out. Chris was like, fuck them. So you know, there was a lot of, that. But we don't often get to, we don't get a chance to do that, particularly as Black women.
Mhm.
And so in hopes that this book can help lead folks to that, and I don't want it to seem like we're going, you know, all women go quit your jobs. For some people, right, they're going to find those strategies, but I do hope they understand that the healing and the necessity of choosing themselves first is something that particularly Black women just don't get a chance to do.
I feel like I went on an emotional roller coaster listening to you in a way, right? So like my first response of we have to leave, I felt this like intense grief for a minute this like intense grief of that we have created a system where the people who care the most and are the right people to be there have to leave for their own health and well-being, and that is the reality of the system that we have and that we're in and that we live in. And there was like this intense emotional moment of grief, like and then there was the moment of like hope and joy in that you were choosing yourself and going and digging into the healing end of it and really fully embracing that, because that's also really social justice in action. That's that personal healing and choosing ourselves and recognizing that we can't just give everything until we die until we've depleted our body so much, and particularly Black women who have given everything historically up until this moment, and that we keep asking to do that it is an act of social justice to say, no, I have to take care of myself first. I deserve to have joy and health and relationships. My children deserve to have my attention and deserve to have me, not when I'm completely depleted, but when I actually have some energy to give them in their life. And that act of social justice gives me hope at the same time as I was feeling this deep grief of like, the system's so broken that we actually have to leave it to be able to do anything that is going to allow us to reimagine what folks really need. So I don't know, that was my own little emotional journey on it. And I thank you for that piece. And I'm curious about what is the reimagine, because you mentioned now that there's some reimagining that's happening. What is that reimagining, and how do we take that healing joy, that, what is it, the action, the social justice joy that needs to happen in order for us to thrive in education and anywhere?
I'm going to jump in before that answer. So we're going to take a commercial break. And when we come back. Hey, listeners, are you enjoying this show? And do you want to hear more? Then please subscribe to our show on your favorite streaming platform. Like this show and tell others about us. We've been busy recording a ton of terrific shows that will be rolling out over the rest of this year. So we would love to be able to have you be a regular member of our community. Thank you so much and have a great, great day. And we're back. Thanks everyone for coming back. And when we left, Susan asked the really compelling question of what now? So I would love to hear that.
Can I just real quick, because I feel like there's an important piece to link the conversation, and it's not that our book is the first one to say this, right? So there's a history of Black women in the United States, but I will say globally, that have been saying, look, y'all, we are carrying you. And Audre Lorde saying specifically, like, it is an act of social justice to take care of yourself if you're a Black woman in particular, right? And people hearing that, citing it, and keeping it moving. And I feel like that's right, especially now with the, like, I can follow the nap ministry on Twitter. I can retweet that I should go take a nap, and then I just move on to the next thing, right? There's such an immediate, like, and I feel like part of that like dismissal is a denial of that Black women really do die younger. So I think about professional Black women in educational spaces, and I think about the context of Black women who have taught me essentially, or who I've learned from. So I think about Audre Lorde, and then June Jordan, and Barbara Christian, and Bebe Clark, folks who are at African American Studies at UC Berkeley, all dying young, all being targeted their entire existence, all talking about being targeted their entire existence. And at some point, like, it's not just like validating people taking care of themselves. It's actually kind of being like, no, fam, you are not taking care of yourself, right? And interrupting the toxicity versus the, like, I mean, Rochelle naming the like, badge of pride of not taking time off, but also being like, if you're mentoring folks, if you're in a supervisory role, if you're gonna like retweet hashtag Black Lives Matter, but not talk to the Black woman that you are formally responsible to professionally.
That's right.
I'm like, at some point we actually have to interrupt on a day-to-day basis of like, no, fam, come on, you are not taking care of yourself. Because what happens when we don't is not just that Black women die young, but in the process, continually refoster that toxicity, right? Because you're not in a place to do anything, because you're like, I'm tripping. So I feel, I mean, it's survival, but it's Bettina loves, we want to do more than survive. More than survive means interrupting the things that cause people to die, right? The things that interrupting the killing of Black women. I would argue that the normalization of Black women carrying everybody as a professional thing kills Black women. If we don't interrupt that, we're contributing to anti-Blackness and Black death by essentially being like, no, just work a little harder, sister. You can get yours if you just work a little harder.
And to validate that this is not at all just unique to the education space. So as you were talking, and as we were talking about, my mind is on Stacey Abrams, right? And on what happened in Georgia. And so we're hung all of our hopes, literally as a country, on one Black woman responding to just the utter, I don't even have like the right words, but I mean, having an election stolen from her, we can just name that, and responding with like, okay, let's go there, but put all of our hopes on her ability to transform a system that is mired in deep racism and intentionally making efforts, even now, as we know, to undermine the work that she did. And so I just want to name like that, education, it happens here, and it's not unique to us as a country and as a world, but like as a country, we've done this in many different other professions as well. And I think it probably, I'm going to guess, makes it even harder in education spaces where there's additional pressure to be the martyr, to then just kind of divest oneself of that narrative.
This is the lived experience for Black women in every aspect. And when I look at the ways in which, when I was speaking about those dissertation committees on which I'm sitting, as they are interviewing other Black women, what I continually hear is, oh, they've been leading since childhood. And that's consistent with my own research, where we start in my community asking Black women to be leaders of the house. They're taking care of younger siblings. They are getting jobs younger. I have several Black female friends who are like, well, I started working when I was 12, right? Like there is a consistent lived experience that says you need to stand up and take care of your community because, racism, oppression, the absence of Black men as a result of racism, oppression, and basically this notion of you have to handle it. You have to handle it. I'm doing some journal writing now. It's not yet a book, Chris, but I'm doing some journal writing now about my own leadership journey, which started super duper young. And the way in which I have consistently felt like everything is on me. So even when I managed a team, even when I had folks reporting to me, right? It was like, I better make sure that I'm checking in on this, and not from a micromanaging situation, but from a like, I need to prove that I'm down. So even though my staff should have all these things handled, I'm just gonna come in 2 hours early for your event that you're doing so that I can prove that I'm not too good to walk it, right? Just all of this stuff, like all of these mental messages. What I want to make sure that, like, I appreciate your clarification, Chris. Like, we are by far, Black feminist thought has been talking about the ways in which we respond for years and years and years and years. And because I love Bell Hooks, I'm sure Bell Hooks is like, you're just repeating everything I've ever said. But there is something about these principles. Yeah. There is something that is common to these principles. And even if we disaggregate the data from what the male principals experience, the female principals all experience the same sense of, I am giving my all. And what happens is, not unlike the Obama effect, we have 2 or 3 really great exemplars, right, of older Black women who've stayed in it, created their kingdom and their fiefdoms, and it's all good. And the districts leave them alone. And they're doing great things for students. And so we see those examples, but we don't acknowledge that they are not the consistent rule, right? They are an exemplar, but not the way that this normally happens for folks. Much more readily, you are silenced, you are pushed out, you're asked to take a cut in salary to do less. To do more that you're doing, but we're going to pay you less. Can you take this position, report to someone who doesn't have, 3 of the 4 degrees that you have, but, support them like consistently. This is what happens to Black women. So our suggestion was, if you're going to be authentic, let's figure out what authenticity is. And we offer a model in the book called the Heart Model that talks about this is what it means to be an authentic leader. But we say that, and then we say, and it might mean that you need to rethink where you do this work. So Susan, before the break, you were like, so what's the hope? What's the joy? For me, I had to find a way to do this work in a way that was not going to be in the same structure that I had done it before. And it's so funny, now that I am out of white oppressive structures, let me be clear, now that I don't work for white oppressive structures, thank you. and I'm able to do a lot more, I'm able to have a lot more flexibility. I've received 4 job notices, right? For these mainly white, like super, super duper duper white areas where like, you know what, you would be dope. Don't you want to come do this? And I was like, why would I put myself back into a system that I've already seen is not healthy? And what happens is for like 10 minutes, I was like, oh, that'd be dope to have that title. Oh, what if I worked for that would be dope. And I had to remind myself, like, at what cost? Right? At what cost would it be dope for me to be back into that thing that's not gonna feed me?
Yeah, it reminds. I was listening to Resma Mannequin talk to a woman who had been working in the Metco system in Boston. I'm originally from the Boston area, which is busing, right? And he was talking to her, and she said, "Well, should I be doing this work with white folks?" And he said to her, and I remember it so clearly because it sounds, a little bit of what you're saying. He said, "You can do it, but you need to charge them at least $500 an hour because you know the toll that it's going to take on your body to hold that work." And it was just a really powerful moment because, and maybe I don't think you should do it at all is what he said to her, but if you're going to do it, you should get paid because you're going to be holding all that toxicity that's going to take a toll on your body, and you're not going to be able to sustain it without giving up your body.
Yeah, and money is not everything. Like, and let me just disclaimer, I'm coming from a place of privilege where I have some. So I get it when I say that, right? So if I was on the climb and I was 25, 30, then that might be a different thing. But at my advanced age of over 50, I have finally realized that, I play dominoes, and in dominoes, we'd be like, all money, not good money. And for me, I have to be able to both get paid, but also do work in the ways that it is lifting me up and feeding me with the people who understand this work, because I am not willing to take myself through that so that I can be like, oh, look at this check. And I know that that's not popular. I get that. But I want to work with folks of color, and I want to work with people who understand folks of color and are creating systems for folks of color. And I'm tired of working for people who don't get it. And I'm tired of forcing my way into people who don't get it. Like, I'm tired of that. So I think it's interesting because 20 years ago, I've been like, yes, that is exactly what we need to be doing. And I'm going to create these coalitions, and I'm going to go in and do that. But I did that. And then the system moved to self-correct.
Well, I'm hoping we get to a place where the values flip and that the wellness and thriving become more than the and I'm coming from a place of privilege as well. But I think that point that you're bringing up, that we deplete that folks are being asked to deplete themselves for whatever it is, for the mission, for the money, for whatever, and that we should be recognizing nothing is worth depleting your whole wellness.
Well, Derek Bell talks about the permanence of racism. And because I'm a Derek Bell follower, I don't know if I'm going to see that place in my lifetime. My hope is that I'm planting seeds that then will be reaped in the next 2 to 3 generations.
We haven't changed the infrastructures of capitalism or schools that specifically, right? So until our connection to schools and capitalism is broken, schools still teach us to value money and value ways of getting money, accumulating money that exploit people of color, specifically Black folk, right? So until we change that, and I don't see, to Derek Bell's, right, the permanence of racism, not only do I not see that, that's not really the conversation we're having nationally or globally. So I feel like I don't know, I'm not certain this is, we're definitely not going to end on this. I'm not certain that this earth can last long enough for us to figure out how to not keep taking shit from each other.
Yeah.
I think that's true. And it's, as somebody who, also, I was at I have to acquire things, and I'm a single mom, and I'm definitely not trying to, I have a lot of privilege too, but I got to this point where I was like, I think I'm going to die. Literally, I think I'm going to die just about 4 months ago. if I keep doing this, I'm going to die. And so you're talking to an unemployed person who has, working for free right now. But it got to this point. So I think and it's because our whole system is set up around a capitalist norms and norms that aren't supportive of women either. And so you add the isms on there or you add your identities on there and it becomes really oppressive really quickly. The education system must change or we are going to continue to lose and for me, our education system holds the keys to creating a more just and equitable society, in my belief. So that's why I keep hammering my head against it. But I too am at this point where I'm like, well, shoot. So, I think that's inspiring. I don't want us to end on this note, on that note either, Chris, because what I want to end this on is, we're at time already and I want to talk another 2 hours. So I think it's a lot of who you are and how you show up and create these spaces, but people can actually do this with you soon. So can you tell us about the event that's coming up where if you want to also have these amazing conversations and transformative discussions with these two amazing doctors, can you share a little bit about ways to work with you two?
Well, there's a lot of ways to work with us, actually. One way to work with us and to take a training from us is we'll be offering Wokeness Don't Stop Bullets, which is a 3-day training that we should have had a flyer that we could just link for you, but we will get that to you. But that's August 9th, 10th, and 13th. And we do have a flyer with a QR code and you can register and get in there. And basically we'll be having these types of conversations, offering spaces of healing. And it is all about what does it mean to really sustain in the midst of these oppressive systems. The other thing that Chris and I do is we're currently working with a few different school districts to absolutely talk about and help them create anti-racist spaces, particularly for leaders. So I know a lot of times we talk about principles, right? But what I have found is there's very little that we do, if any, type of training for central office leaders. And it is imperative that districts start thinking about how they are training often their most overlooked groups, right? So I want to train and we want to model what does it mean to do effective learning at the leadership level, so for cabinet level. But there's also, leaders in your, financial services department and leaders in your
HR department, I imagine.
Gosh, right? And then
right?
your services department and your custodial departments, who often are overlooked as part of districts and don't receive training, but they're often where you find your largest groups of folks of color and folks who remain in districts. So we are doing that type of work for those school districts as well. So
just a quick clarifying, is the training in person or will it be virtual?
Oh, it's virtual.
It's virtual.
Yeah.
Making sure. But everything's virtual now, but it's starting to move back into person. So
not for me.
We are team stay alive.
Yes.
But then also just because I really appreciate the fact that we are reaching more people. And so one of the beauties and one of the blessings in the pandemic has been, I've been working with folks across the nation in a way I could not have, if we weren't on Zoom. So we want to have that opportunity for folks as well.
Well, and for folks that wonder, can you have a deep and meaningful connection across Zoom? You absolutely can.
You absolutely can.
And it's, I feel like often just as meaningful and transformative as an in-person connection point. And you're right, you're able to talk to people that you wouldn't normally have that connection to. And for a lot of folks that are probably feeling very isolated or in spaces where they can't talk in front of their local home community, you're creating a lot of, so I want to acknowledge that and thank that as well. Yeah.
Plus, it limits awkward side conversations when people are like, "So, as a white person, how are you and Rochelle? How did you actually meet?" So we open this in a better way to ask that, but we are often asked, I will say by white folk in particular, "How did you meet?" And those are always these side conversations that remote teaching actually stops. So there's a benefit of not the microaggressions stop with online access remotely, but there's a I would say a benefit of awkward, uncomfortable, enforced whiteness just can't interrupt in the same way.
Well,
It's
there's
nothing
not
like,
to like validate me in the side, like I'm going to run to the person of color in the break to get
Yeah,
that
yes,
validation.
yes,
yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
So often I get from well-meaning, often white women, like I'm looking for, what they're really trying to say through coded language. I want a Black person that I can teach with too, so that they can, affirm me. And I'm like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, maybe you should learn to talk to Black people. Like, I
there's a
don't,
lot. There's a lot of Black people.
There's
maybe
a lot.
talk to somebody. I don't know.
Try it
So
out.
like I often get that. I don't know if you get the flip of that, Chris. Like I want to find the well-meaning Black woman to work with too, but I get that from white women.
Yeah, definitely.
That's important,
Well,
right?
people get confused by the authentic relationship and they want it, but they don't know how to have it.
Do they get confused? Because I'm like, okay.
I mean, we could go deeper into that.
You're right.
We could go deeper into that, but what I'm saying is they don't know how to be an authentic relationship.
That's right.
Okay.
So that's what I meant by confused. Not that they're confused by yours. They're like, how did they get? They don't feel it internally themselves, and because they haven't had it as an authentic way, it's always sort of performative. That they're confused by their own internal experience around it, and that's what I mean by confused.
Gotcha.
So, I like to say white people, and this is not only white people, but it's predominantly white people, like 99%, right? Like white folk segregate themselves, I'll say, because I don't really do this, but white folks segregate themselves away from people of color, and they're like, I don't know how to reach out to people of color. It's like you chose to live in a neighborhood that explicitly excluded. Your definition of schools is best, meaning not a lot of people of color, or teachers of color, right? It's like your whole life is getting rid of people of color. You can't then be like, how do I befriend a person of color? It's like that you can't have both.
Well, and you're
white
going
supremacy
to
or not.
then you're going to be responsible for helping me come out of my white supremacist points of view, and you're going to be my teacher.
$500 an hour. That's what I heard.
Right. So $500 an hour.
Even then,
even then, that's right. Even then,
not worth it.
Not worth it.
So we're over time.
Keep going. So I'm glad you're stopping.
We could keep going because this is clearly like, I want to end on that appreciation because you've left us with a lot to think about, to process, to feel. And that's what we want. We need to get to a place where we can process and feel and grow.
Super glad. I love being here. This is great. This is what Chris and I do. So feel free to reach out and let us know how we can support.
Yeah, please. Thank you all. Such a joy to talk with both of you. And I imagine folks are going to be clamoring to spend time with you. I want to, if I wasn't unemployed, I'd be signed up myself. But, single mom. So I'll wait till the next time. But I think it's incredible what you're offering. And again, just a safe nurturing, but also a space that holds people accountable. And I think I don't want to miss that point either. It's not just kumbaya and holding hands and talking about things, but it's actually talking about action and holding ourselves accountable for our own well-being, but also for how we're impacting others. And I know you both bring that as well. I feel like that came through, but I want to name that this isn't all, it requires action. And I love what you said, Chris, it requires, for us white folks, it requires action every day and making choices every day to be different, do different, and act in anti-racist ways and call folks out. That's how we can show up and be in this work. And so I just want to appreciate that as well. Chris, you have any last words? You're the last one.
Right? All hugs and affirmations to Rochelle. This, like, my connection into Megan and Susan, you both are awesome and rad. If I can use the word rad, 1980s coming back. And I appreciate this conversation. And Rochelle, you keep me going. You keep me on the days that I'm like, fuck this, I am done. You're like, really though? Are we? Right. So I just appreciate who and how you are in this work and how we continue to lift and climb together.
Oh my God, that was amazing. I needed that on a Friday. Thank you so much.
Class is dismissed. Wasn't that fun? Susan and Megan are always happy to greet you on the next episode of The Awakening Educator. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Education is the foundation for a brighter future. Open your eyes to The Awakening Educator